facts from a different lens, because it's providing you with an explanation. It's not just saying, this is so. It is also telling you why it is so and how it is so. Okay. Did I come through this time, Alka?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So now the next thing I've also got here, or provides a blueprint for how things should be. So it's not just a question of say, okay, let's just stay with positivism because all of us study it. So let me just come back to it for a moment. When you had Austin come and he spoke in terms of law as the command of the sovereign, right? And he had a range of things that the sovereign has to get a certain, like this kind of people have to obey the sovereign, all of those kind of factors which contribute to what comes as the command from the sovereign is law. That was Austin's theory. When Hart came after him, he said, no, but law is not only commands. What are the kinds of, the sort of rules that you require to be when you have a dispute? What about the rules that you require when you have to determine whether something is a law or not a law? So the entire business of primary and secondary rules came from Hart. And Hart kind of complicated the discourse a little more to say that, no, you can't just stay with, you can't look at law as only a set of rules of a certain kind which are telling people to do and not do things. Because the law performs other functions other than just telling people do this or don't do that. Now he was also saying it from looking around and seeing what he was also providing a way of thinking about the law by saying that no, you can't just talk about law in this very primary kind of manner. You need a more complex understanding. Law has to operate in a more complex way. Dworkin, who comes in after Hart, then sort of says that, oh, you can't really, okay, there was this case, that major case that they had in the US at that point. Not that, wherein it was that, okay, you have, there is this grandson who's murdered his grandfather. And the question is basically, can he inherit from the grandfather when the legislation doesn't explicitly prohibit or doesn't disqualify a murderer from inheriting? If the legislation does not disqualify a murderer from inheriting, can you inherit? And the court before whom the case went said, no, he cannot inherit. And you've had these, a range of positivist thinkers who had a problem with the fact that if there has not been a rule made, which is explicitly disqualifying the grandson, then was the court right in disqualifying him? And Dworkin said, no, law doesn't operate only in rules. You as much need principles. You get it? It's like what you have, you need to explain what is happening. Because if I have, of course, have had students who have also said, yes, but if the law is not disqualifying him, why cannot he not inherit? When I was shocked, my thing was, yeah, usko maar diya, tum bol rahe ho, usko he can inherit. But they were saying, but why can't he inherit? By the letter of the law, there is nothing disqualifying. So how did the court disqualify them? We're saying, and then that's wherein you speak in terms of that whole principle of that, you can't go to equity with dirty hands, or like you can't take advantage of your own wrong. All of these are principles, they are not rules. Because exactly when is it that you're taking advantage of your own wrong? And what would be seen as dirty hands is not something which is like fixed. On the other hand, rules are operating in this more fixed kind of a manner. The explanation that you needed to give, or the way you wanted people to think about the law, in bringing the whole notion of principles, what Dworkin did was that he brought in a certain amount of flexibility in how the law operates, recognizing the fact that if you just made these very rigid dabbas, there will be a whole range of situations for which you can't possibly have made rules in advance. I am see, for me, this is a very, very interesting kind of, okay, then how did you develop your theory, and all of those kinds of things come in. But this is, as a single line thing to set you thinking, that you have to see theory as an explanation. And that's why I'm going back and saying, then when I encounter feminist thought and they say law is made in the image of man, and you very often will say that the aspirations which you put out for what you need to be doing if you want to be excelling, and you do all of those things, and you still find that you don't get the recognition which, say, maybe your male colleague is getting. And you suddenly find that, no, I mean, it's not just the excellence, it's the excellence is being practiced by whom will also be determining, and who is looking at that excellence. So that feminist explanation kinds of gets you to understand your own experience of feeling excluded and ousted. This is the connection that I feel very often we don't make. Now, the moment you do that, you might find every explanation which comes out in our so-called schools of jurisprudence doesn't necessarily speak to me or analyze the situation that I am wanting to analyze. That's the connection I want you to make. You know, whereas when we teach jurisprudence, we'll say positivism, natural law, realism, like critical legal studies, feminism, critical race, postmodernism. Or in an earlier era, you'll say historical school, sociological school. That's the way in which you would kind of teach. And you're listening there and saying, "Acha, ye pound ne kaha tha, ye usne kaha tha, ye isne kaha tha." That's the way in which we carry on. Whether that explanation means anything to me or not, you are not told to engage with that theory, to say, okay, so-and-so made this analysis for this reason. But this is that person's explanation for what was happening, and that person's prescription for what should happen.
Excuse me, ma'am. The scholars, Joe Osteen or all these Bentham had given their theories at ancient time, century before, ma'am. They have their own time. We have our own time. Whether these theories can eradicate our poverty in India, why should we follow these foreigners, scholars? Why should follow our own Indian scholars, ma'am? Because we have our own circumstances, our own situations in this. No, ma'am. So many times Supreme Court is also following the foreigner cases, ma'am. What is your view, please?
I'll come to that, Pramod. I mean, I have a very clear this thing on it. I'll just come to it in a moment. It's something which I reach by the end. I do that by the time I end the lecture. But I wanted to firstly just start from accepting who we follow is not the point. But the point is just this, at this point of time, that a theory is an explanation for a situation. So your point is very valid, Pramod, that if that explanation is not of my situation, is it of any use to me? Okay. At the same time, you are also having this great difficulty of that we do not have. And that's the reality, that after our, that kind of meta theorizing, how much of that is available for us? Because if supposing somebody said something 4,000 years ago or 400 years ago, does that also speak to me in any which way? Is a question that we'll have to worry about. Just hold your peace for a moment, Pramod. I'll come back to your question. Okay. Next slide, Pramod. Now, because I'm saying theory is an explanation, and I'm saying you're engaging with an explanation, I'm also putting out here how not to do theory. And this is not, I'm not going to take too much time on it, but it's like, I somewhere feel that at least a lot of us got spoiled for theory, felt that we didn't want to do anything with it because we were taught to the students in the most deadening way that you can find. In the sense of it was just a description. You were meant to memorize, and then you were asked this question of what was this one's theory? What is Kelson's categorical imperative? What is so-and-so's something? That kind of, so it's just a description or a collation, something very similar to maybe how we do law. That's what I'm saying, that you don't do. Then the next kind of thing is not to see it as final word. Pramod, partly I answer you here, Because if you don't see it as final word and you just see it as a way of thinking, and one doesn't take this line of, why should we not follow our culture sort of things? That I'm not saying that. I'm saying this. It's a body of thought. It exists. You engage with all thinking. You take from it what maybe works for you, but you don't see it as final word. If you don't see it as final word, Pramod, there's not an issue. The problem comes in if you tell someone, but where does the basic structure gets its legitimacy from? Saying, no, it gets from the Constitution. But it is like, if it gets in from the Constitution itself, then that is like internal too. So evidently legitimacy needs to be coming from somewhere else. Where should it come from? No, but Kelsen said that you have to have a categorical imperative and your Grund norm, and your Grund norm is, because categorical imperative came from Kant, that your Grund norm and your constitution is your Grund norm, and that's the way in which we engage with theory. You're not asking the further question that, okay, in my country, if we have come up with a basic structure theory in relation, because after all, it came in only as an amendment thing, that you can't amend the constitution in such a manner that you are destroying its basic structure. Now, the Supreme Court, in bringing that theory, because before that, in Golaknath, they had talked in terms of that fundamental rights can't be amended. In Keshwanand Bharati, they accepted the fact that fundamental rights can be amended, but the basic structure cannot be. Now, you can say, your basic structure hai kya? But the more fundamental thing which the Supreme Court did by bringing the theory of basic structure was, it in some manner, you could say, saved your constitution from the marauding from majorities. It doesn't matter how many votes you've got or how strong your particular party is. There is still some things that you can't do in relation to the constitution because that is bigger than you. The entire construction of that theory was one way of getting accountability or getting a certain amount of reticence and getting a certain amount of self-control in how legislatures, even with large majorities, function.
So my student is saying, I want job, I want money, ma'am. Why I should go for the theory of this for the author jurist, ma'am? The actual situation is going on.
Pardon, I didn't get you.
Our students are saying, for example, ma'am, we want job, we want money, ma'am, after this doing a master degree in law. So why would we study original text of all these jurists, ma'am?
See, I am not onto whether you're studying original texts or not, Pramod. That's the reason why I have actually not sat here and talked in terms of this theorist and that theorist. I have not even tried to do that. I am only saying this, that it is something very similar to the point I was making in the previous lecture, when I was saying that, all right, you want to make money, but you can't make money unless you are made competent to make money. And to be competent to make money, the one fundamental thing is because, all of us can talk in terms of what the situation for us, our life situations were before the pandemic and the lockdown and after the pandemic and the lockdown. We can't say we've come back to the same world. None of us can say that. We can't say that the way in which we were thinking of so many things are exactly how they were before. How do I deal with it, Pramod? How do I deal with this new reality? It can only happen if I am equipped to think for myself and to sort of adjust and calibrate things which are already there. How do I nuance it and apply it to the situation that is there before me? Which means that you need to be like doing thinking yourself and provoking your students to think. Not telling them, ye final word hai. That's what I'm saying. You don't do theory as a superimposition, not as a veto. That if I'm asking you hard questions, you tell me, but this is what Hart said or Dworkin said or this one said or that one said. Or the Supreme Court of India said. You tell me exactly why I should be following this. Give me that kind of reasoning. Compel me to reason in that manner. help me to theorize. Theory is not borrowing from somebody. Theory is your explanations for. You may not make the meta theory. You make the chotu explanation, but you have started to theorize. And that you can learn. It's like they'll tell you if you want to write, you need to read. The more you read, the better you learn how to write, because as you read, you learn how other people were writing. You don't have to copy them. The first level of anybody who learns painting, you firstly copy the masters. In learning to paint from them, you start to get the strokes. You come to your style in time. I have had students who say, I am scared of public speaking. And I will say, you write your entire speech and you practice it before the mirror 20 times. And read your speech. Don't try to do extempore. Because you have to arrive at that point wherein all of this has got so internalized that you're not struggling for words. You're not struggling for formulation. If you ask a question, like supposing you go for a conference and you have to ask a question, and you raise your hand and then suddenly some garbled thing comes out and you say, I'll never ever again ask a question. That's the kind of feeling you go away with. I am just suggesting it makes a lot of sense that before you raise your hand, you write your question. And then you read your question. Because if you write your question, you read your question, it's better for the speaker, it's good for you. You've spoken at the place, but you've spoken with a text which is coherent. These are absolute basic things, but they are so important. It's from that standpoint, Pramod, I'm saying, because I have to know how to think. I have to learn how to think. It makes sense for me to engage with thinkers. I don't have to agree with them. That's why I'm saying not as final word, not as imposition, not as veto, and not as description. None of these ways you need to be doing theory. And this is how largely we teach theory. And because we largely teach it theory in this manner, a fat lot of good it does to have learned it. आपने रट्टा लगा दिया, वो रट्टा. Yes, Savita, tell me.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, due to this digitalization, it's my sense that the students were lacking the writing skill, reading skill, and entire. Do you think that it has a little bit negative impact on the practical reading, writing skills, ma'am?
See, Savita, whether we like it or we don't, we're not going to go back to the pre-digitalization age. Let's accept that, firstly. Secondly, I can now see that there's this chat GPT that has come. The chat GPT, it's like literally an artificial intelligence where supposedly that, I had this, I think, one raging kind of conversation in our faculty group. Okay, now students are just going to have that chat GPT write their projects for them and give it to you. Now, when we talked to a lot of technology experts, what they had to say was that the teacher gets the chat GPT to write and gives it to the students and saying, "Isko correct karo. Can you improve it? What's wrong with it?" Use the chat GPT to improve their writing skills. Because unless and until we engage with this technology, Savita, we have no option. We can't say, "Hum apne bachpan mein aise likhte the." It doesn't help.
No. I'm like that, ma'am. No. Means, ma'am, what happens due to this technology, the WhatsApp messages, they're forgetting the actual writing.
What I'm trying to say to you is this, that in the kind of assignments you give them, you compel them to kind of correct it. It's the sort of work we do with them. Now you give them that WhatsApp message with all that abbreviations and saying, "Iska sense banao." Let's see, तुम पूरे word के तुमको words का भी पूरे spellings भी आते हैं कि नहीं आते? I'm only trying to say to you that there are two ways of looking at this situation. One is we bemoan it. It's true. The world has moved. This generation operates in a very different kind of, their way of looking at things is very different. We have to accept it. My issue then is this, that does it mean that the skills that we learned or the skills we see as fundamental are irrelevant now. I don't think so. I only feel that the manner in which you do it changes. See, I never used to use for my own classes, I did not use PowerPoint. Then came the pandemic and all of us had to go online. I used to also terrorize my students to read for class. I would sort of do all the histrionics in the world if they hadn't read for class. They just had to read for my course. I did not do any of that histrionics, Savita, throughout the time when we were having online classes. What did I do? I used PowerPoint to put all the critical paragraphs that I wanted them to read to come into the classroom and make them read it there. There were two options, I could come, because my colleagues were doing it, and I could say, "Padhte nahi hai, bolte nahi hai, falana nahi hai."
We are also doing, madam. We are compelling that by giving the seminar presentations, group
That's what I'm saying is that if you start using that same screen in an intelligent manner, because they can't close their eyes, they will be seeing it. Then you're pointing to lines and words and sentences, and your entire lecture is going accordingly. It's just that we can make
in general manner, like we, as I'm from the commerce background, we have a lot of discussion in classroom and everything. But just I'm talking about all the like the arts and others. By thinking of those students, just I'm discussing.
If you don't teach arts, then you don't know how those students think. I'm sorry.
No, madam. I used to little bit engage with them also. There, I faced a problem of this. That's why I'm discussing. That's it.
I get you. I'm only sort of addressing the same situation. We have two kinds of options, Savita, the way I see it. Is that either we can just say these students, they are not serious, they don't want to learn, they just want to take the shortcut and everything.
Yeah.
That's one way of seeing it.
Yes.
The other is to say this is their reality. What is my challenge as a teacher?
Yes. Yeah,
how do I manage it?
That's the thing. Okay. Thank you, madam. Nice to see.
So, okay, now this I have done. Pramod, next slide, please. Okay, now, in a way, I have been preparing this, why do we need to engage with theory? I'm saying to look beyond or behind the obvious so that we don't take things as face value. And I am saying this process of deconstruction is not only to concepts, but to theory itself. This kinds of answers you, Pramod, in the sense that when you say, why should I listen to? You should. But before you, don't throw them out on this ground, what do they know about my country? There is a very important philosopher in our country, a gentleman called Dr. Raghuram Raju. And he has brought out a book which is like talking in terms of calibrating Western philosophy for India. Now, what he is talking about, Pramod, is this, that he is saying, possibly to some extent because of our colonial past, also to a great extent because of colonialism, that their theorizing and their theories have got that kind of reach, which our theories are not having. The sort of plurality that subsists in your country, you're also finding it difficult for someone to theorize the whole country. What he is suggesting, Pramod, and I'm putting out a similar sort of thing. What he is suggesting is that you look at what is available there, what seems like of some relevance to you, but then you calibrate it for your own country so you don't bring it as it is. You sort of tailor it to what is needed for us. If you tailor it, then that tailoring is yours. Kapda aap kahin se bhi lekar aao. Shirt to aapne banai hai na. Aapke yahan pe, supposing we say that all of the time, that some kind of good is not manufactured in your country, you will import it. But then not necessary that you don't stitch the clothes according to what is appropriate for your climate, for your functional needs, what you require to do. It's that kind of point that he makes. And it's a very, very persuasive argument, Pramod, wherein he's not taking this, it's not talking in polarities and opposites like, ya to हाँ, सब कुछ लेना है या कुछ भी नहीं लेना है. Say, उतना ले लो, जितना आपके काम आएगा. Just take, adjust it, modify it, like tailor it, calibrate it. Which also necessarily means that you are then applying your mind for what is appropriate for my country. If I'm throwing out somebody's theory, I'm saying this is nonsense, this doesn't work for us. Makes no sense. And this is my data for why I'm saying it won't work for us. So you're engaging with what is happening in your country. You're looking at the data in your own country. If you have an argument which is coming from, or an explanation which is coming from elsewhere, if that explanation helps you, see, our quarrel with what the court does when it's quoting either foreign decisions or foreign theorists, it is not calibrating. It's just taking them as it is and it's putting them here. That's a problem. So we critique that. But as scholars, our engagement can be as to how do we calibrate. And that's my basic point there, that deconstruction is not to be just of concepts, but also of theories. And then you can say, this one I don't want to, this is very evidently, like coming in from a white supremacist outlook. Why the hell should I want to pick up this theory and apply it in my country? It means nothing. But a bell hook's writing, bell hook's entire critique of patriarchy, and I would say the most persuasive feminist I have read. She talks in terms of patriarchy, not feminism not being a enterprise only for the empowerment of women. She says patriarchy is not really oppressive only of women, it's as oppressive of men. Because the kind of emotion that men are permitted in patriarchy is only violence. The only emotion they are permitted is violence. You're not meant to cry, you're not meant to feel bad, none of those things are allowed to you. So if you don't critique the way in which patriarchy operates on men, your entire feminist project is incomplete. Yes, Alka.
Ma'am, how to make this process of deconstruction more authentic? Because we may have our preconceived notions or inherent biases with respect to those theories. So how can we assume that?
See, it's like this, Alka, that evidently I am kind of giving you a very essence sort of a thing. So if it's like, I have a student at this point of time who wants to critique monogamy. Because this is a generation which is looking at, I'm forgetting the word at the moment, but it's about the fact of that you could be attracted to several people together and there's nothing wrong with it. So they have an issue with this very monogamous way of creating relationships and monogamy in marriage. She's doing it as an LLM dissertation. So we were going back and forth, and so she's saying to me, should I do relationships or should I do only marriage? I said, for your LLM, please only marriage, because relationships will be huge. And we kept going on and on about the fact of, and then I said, okay, see, we brought monogamy with the Hindu Marriage Act. And the Hindu Marriage Act was about 10 years in at least making, if not more. We asked, why did we opt for monogamy in our country? Deconstruction to that extent will require that you go back and you find out in that period, at that time, why did we come for monogamy? What caused us to do it? Then you understand, because see, the truth is that monogamy is far from like what should I say, an unequivocal norm in Hindu society. It's not like people don't practice polygamous. Polyamory is there. They talk about polyamory. So as a consequence, they kind of have a problem with monogamy. But if you're finding that, all right, because of the fact that you had a much longer history of polygamy, and suddenly the law said monogamy, and said we'll not recognize a marriage, which then you started having, if you teach family law, you know that You had this problem in terms of the second wife or the woman who's got married and doesn't have what is her entitlement. If that woman in a country where gender parity is far from a reality, if you don't give any recognition to that second wife, what problem? When we brought in legitimization of children, we came with the same issue. No? If you don't, what us bachche ka kya kasoor hai? So, but I sort of like yesterday we decided that, okay, let's deconstruct monogamy in our law and go back and see what were these guys thinking, why did they bring in? So in anything, when you're doing this deconstruction, it means a lot of piece by piece research, Alka. It means going back in time, going and looking at the next, I think the last slide I have.
Yes, ma'am, it must be focused on some objective outcome rather than
at least you need to be looking at materials which is not just my hunch. It absolutely requires that you need to sort of take that into account. Deconstruction is a rigorous exercise. It's not. So if I'm saying otherwise, because if this woman who said that the law is made in the image of the man, if she were not to provide concrete evidence of what she was saying, her theory meant nothing. Then it just becomes an opinion. So I am saying now this is my last slide here. It's like, how should you engage with theory? And I'm saying I see it. And that's where in Pramod, for me, it doesn't matter where the thought is coming from. I think Gandhi said this, where he said, you keep your windows open, no? Like you need to be, it's an aid to reflection. And sometimes you need to look at material which is coming in from people and places who are totally different from yours to be recognizing the fact that there's another way of doing things. That there is not just this one way of doing things. I mean, basic structure, which is like amongst one of our most critical constitutional law principles, came in from a German. It's a German's article, of course, on the Indian Constitution and the sort of problems that you have. But he kind of triggered the court to start thinking from there. That's why I'm saying when I talked in terms of calibration, Pramod, I said also that, you go with this thing of that it can be modified or tweaked. Because the theory came from elsewhere, a decision came elsewhere, I kind of tailor it to what suits my mind. That is my contribution. As a scholar, as a jurist, to say, nahi, as exactly how it was made, there's a problem. This is why I'm saying, and when I'm talking in terms of, I was giving you this study of at least a couple of anthropologists who've done some amazing work in relation to surrogacy. Now, they have created ethnographic material. We are not doing in primary research. Primary research has been done by somebody in another discipline. But it gets you to look at your surrogacy statute and from a very different lens altogether. I'm saying it needs to be historicized. You can't sort of like, if something came 200 years ago, then you need to be saying why it came, when it came, in 200 years, what were the circumstances then. Very often, like, say, when we talk about how.
Same with ma'am, Sabrimala temple, ma'am.
I'm sort of saying is that at each point, so when you are then contemporizing it, you have to then think in terms of how did it originally come? You can't make it like that period difference didn't happen. See, Alka, as an answer to your earlier question also, it's the same thing, that when you are deconstructing and you're going back in time and you're trying to comprehend what happened there, then to say, okay, now in today's times, how do I want to tweak it? Because in the Sabrimala thing, there are two things. One is like the barrier in terms of the exclusion, like the point I had made earlier when I said, when the exclusion comes as a permissible thing in the law, and the exclusion happens because like lots and lots of women said, no, I still don't want to go. I prefer not to go. That's a choice she is making, but there is no barrier to her going. These are two separate kinds of things. To say the rule doesn't permit you, or to say that, I definitely feel that my beliefs are more than what a court or a constitution can say to me. it prevails over this. You can still say that. But it brings in more complexity in how you do it. And I am only saying this to you, that in looking at whatever material you're looking at, please don't use your critical lens. Take the aid of theories if you take it in that manner. Because see, our difficulty is this, they've been provided to us in this very non-negotiable terms. This is the final word on that issue. And you feel so dwarfed by it. So then the only way in which you can retain your own scholastic freedom is to have nothing to do with it. I'm only sort of saying is that let's not throw baby with bathwater. There is something to be gained from that engagement. And the points I was making in the previous lecture, when I was talking in terms of, how to ask the law question, I feel a lot of critique in asking the law question comes from theory. So if you join the two together, that's the point I'm trying to make. And there's this constant kind of movement between data and theory. And whoever said that theory is just something somebody else does. Theory is something as much you do. You provide explanations and then you build on them. So it's not necessary. I'm not saying you start from there. Just like I said, you don't start from speaking extempore. Similarly, when you start theorizing, you firstly read other people. You read what explanations they are providing. You learn how to understand, you learn how to inter-se critique them. When we insist on review of literatures, that's basically what it is, that you don't think that because you have started to think today or you have started to write, the world is born today. Bakshi calls it that we don't do original research, we do aboriginal research. We believe that, because aaj main paida hua hu, to aaj se sab kuch shuru hai, so you just negate everything that went before. I'm only trying to sort of, I suppose, my lectures were an effort at making a similar provocation. Okay, like think from there. And
Ma'am, how to derive a better synergy between data and theory? Can you please elaborate upon that?
Do both. Don't do data. Don't look at data. Don't look at statutes. Don't look at other people's. There's a large amount of primary research, Alka, which is to be there, which is not done by lawyers, not done by law academics. It's done by sociologists, done by historians. But these guys are really engaging with data on a very primary level as to what is happening. We don't read that. But if you read it, and then you come back and you say, okay, if this is what is in fact happening in the implementation of this law, then how do I teach the statute? And
actually, the problem is with reference to the interdisciplinary research, the sociologists or the people from social work, they are in the what ought to be zone. And they are
not really in the what ought to be. They are telling you what is happening. You need to pick up that material and see if it will help you to rework what is happening in law. They are telling us what is happening in society. They're telling us how our legal interventions, what it is doing to people. It's a research we are not doing. But if that research is being provided to us, the minimum that we can do, Alka, is like to at least rethink what we teach and what we read with a more critical lens.
And then we are stuck in the insufficiencies of law. The law is not sufficient to address those issues which they are posing before us.
See, I am not talking, Alka.
Sorry, ma'am.
See, I am not talking, Alka, in terms of like thinking about this as a cycle of amending the law. Because the moment you feel that, such and such thing can be fixed by amending the law on this and that manner, then it's like, again, it goes back to our way of looking at law as this ultimate panacea of everything. And if we just get that right formulation, we'll sort out everything. What I feel we need to recognize is that it's demonstrating to us on a constant basis that any effort at social change, social reform cannot begin and end with law reform. Law reform is only one of those components there. And I think it's important for a certain amount of humility for us as law scholars to start saying कि हाँ कुछ चीजें हम fix कर सकते हैं, पर सारी की सारी society नहीं. It's like each time somebody tells us that let's amend the law, we'll say, you amend it in this manner, this provision, and this, that, and the other, and all will be sorted. And then you find people are very dejected and disappointed why that did not happen. Because you're really asking the law to carry a certain burden it's not fit to carry. I think it's about time that we recognize it. Possibly our legal understanding will become more nuanced and our expectations more realistic. And what we teach also, we equip our students to kind of actually go prepared into the world and not go there believing they were going to really make this great, whatever, and find that actually hum to kuch khas kar nahi paaye. That disillusionment can be kind of handled if you send them prepared. And if we set up more in chotu goals for ourselves rather than these big things. Because if we start with, I am going to tell Parliament what it's going to do and I'm going to convince the Supreme Court as to what it is going to do, then necessarily I'm going to feel dejected and frustrated. But if you come up with saying that I am going to teach my subject in a more nuanced and complex manner, I'm going to encourage my students to think, this is more in my hands. This is more doable. And then if I don't do it, I'm being unprofessional. But if I pick up those huge, big goals, which I can't ever fulfill, and then sit back and say, I'm not doing anything because I can't do anything. I would somewhere say is at least make those goals which you can do. My idea of both asking the law question and engaging with legal theory is to say it is in some ways gives you a, taking that very Hungarian thinking, it makes you relatively autonomous. It gives you a certain amount, at least in our everyday things, we have much, much more possibility of being able to living more worthwhile professional lives ourselves and more, let's say, more challenging lives for our students. Allow them to disagree with you. Teach them to. Bell Hooks has a book where she's saying, it's she actually calls it as teaching to digress. I've got it wrong anyway. It's about the fact of you teach people how to dissent, how to disagree. And if you bring in disagreement and discussion in your own classroom, it's not just your student who benefits.
Ma'am, I have one more question. Being a member of legal fraternity, how can we be more honest towards the social outreach programs to realize the notion of distributive justice in that sense?
Well, I would somewhere say is that more honest is that at least don't go and give sabaj bhag to people. Don't talk about law being this huge panacea. But there are small things that we can definitely do and we should. Sometimes it may be just somebody's application that they need to write, or a scheme from which they benefit, or it's literally I am saying, concentrate on the microsystems and say that this is, okay, say suppose, I have a colleague who works in the prisons here, and he takes a team of students to kind of work with the prisoners, and they literally okay, वो parole board बैठना है, उसमें एक application जाना है. That application needs to be connected to what exactly is the situation that's happening. You're not saying कि हम पूरा का पूरा imprisonment का system बदल रहे हैं, but you are providing to that extent that person some very real legal aid which that person needs. To say कि legal aid cannot, restructure the whole world is no reason not to provide that help to the person wherein it can provide help. I would somehow say that's the most honest way of doing it, because you're telling that person also कि देखो ये पूरा का पूरा system जो है वो आपके लिए geared नहीं है. हमें ये देखना है कि how can we kind of subvert the system and provide a space for you. That's your smartness. That's your commitment. And that requires that our students should be critical thinkers, not parrots. And who's going to make them critical thinkers? They will become parrots if that's what we demand from them. If we say that if you don't reproduce everything I said in class, I'm going to fail you, or that you can't really get that distinction unless you do that, then they are going to become parrots. But if we say that what I'm demanding from you is that I've given you a problem, you think. And think, not just any opinion, but जैसे मैं आपको बोल रही हूँ ना, you go back and you do the requisite research, you join the dots and you come up with something, we'll appreciate you for it. Maybe something that you have not thought of and the student has. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, Pramodji, I think we have gone over time, but...
Really, I can't give formal vote of thanks, ma'am, because I heard about you, ma'am, because one of your student, Pramod Bhardwaj, he is also practicing in this 30,000 Court or High Court of Delhi, ma'am. So he told you about you, ma'am, and he tell me that how madam tell us how to live a life by this teaching jurisprudence, ma'am. He is a good fan of you, ma'am. So really, that's why I invite you, and really I think मुझे भी, ma'am, I have to redefine my life also by following you. No formal lot of things, ma'am. Simply from the core of my heart, ma'am. Really appreciable. You are actually saying a lot of things which are beyond the books also, ma'am. Because
thank you so much.
These things can't be said in books or in words, ma'am. So thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
really
you so much.
Inspiring or really informative, ma'am. Really inspiring.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. All the best, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your refresher course.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye.
Sir, attendance and feedback form?
Someone is sending, ma'am. Some company is there. Poonam ma'am will send you, na? Poonam
Okay.
ma'am will send you, na? I have no.
So next session from 2 p.m.
I think you have to go for book review or something like that, because madam has taken morning session also. So I think it's next session is at 3:30.
Okay, sir.
Meeting is also there with vice chancellor after 2 p.m. So I have to go for that.
Okay.
और if 3:30 जो resource person है, अगर वो 2 बजे ले लेगा, तो I will ask him, ना, for that.
Okay, sir. Sir, attendance group में आएंगी या?
अगर यहाँ नहीं है तो that मैं will send you in group. Don't worry.
Okay, sir.